good to have John Hayward back. We had a little trouble connecting yesterday, and I said, this stuff's too important to just skip over. John Hayward is the Deputy National Security Editor at Breitbart and joins us again. John, thanks for joining us again this morning, my friend. I wanted to talk about this battleship buildup in the Caribbean because Maduro, I noticed yesterday, he sounded like some American podcasters. No more endless wars, he was shouting in the streets while he was being surrounded by cheering throngs. No more endless wars. I thought, boy, that sounds strangely propaganda-ish and familiar. So what's going on here, my friend? Good morning.
Maduro is convinced we're trying a regime change operation, and an aircraft carrier is a lot of firepower. I mean, that is an enormous amplification of what we have down in the Caribbean. It's far more than you would need to blow up a couple of drug boats, although one reason the carrier's there could be increased surveillance, increased ability to find them. Once you've got a carrier group out there, nothing is going to slip past it. So it's an iron wall being brought down against these drug smugglers. Maduro's convinced it's a setup for an invasion and regime change. I really don't see that. I don't see any play that would profit Trump, or White House to go in and try to take over Venezuela. I mean, it just doesn't seem likely to me. No ground forces in position that anyone's aware of, and you can't take over a country with air power. So I think the point here was to rattle Maduro, and it's working. Right now, he looks weak, which I think is one of the goals. You want him to look scared. You want him running around screaming and waving his hands. Maybe that will embolden the Venezuelan opposition, and there will be a chance to actually knock this socialist dictator out of power.
Just for people's memory, they had a hinky, to put it mildly, election and regime change there, which President Trump has talked about repeatedly. What is the goal, do you think, ultimately, with the Trump administration? Because I can already hear it. There has been the assertion that there may be ground troops deployed to Venezuela. You just said you don't see any evidence of that. But what does seem to be the very specific focus on Venezuela for the Trump administration, in your view?
That's a big part of it, is making Maduro look bad. He's been a loud critic of the Trump administration. Also, Latin America in general is our backyard. There's a lot of Chinese influence spreading in Latin America. That's disturbing. This is one way of shaking all the dictators up down there and reminding them it's our neighborhood, it's our backyard. We're the ones with the aircraft carriers, the F-35s. That's our region of the globe that we don't want China penetrating. I think that's a big part of the reason why this is being done.
And in terms of the drug boats, is that a massive concern or one of the concerns? That is to say, given what you just said, the Chinese influence and just kind of reminding them who's boss, is the drug boat thing part of that operation, or is that a real substantive problem the United States is facing? Drugs pouring in and stopping them where at the point of entry, these drug boats. Is that a real focus or part of this campaign?
Oh, it's a real problem. I mean, we have a huge problem with drugs flowing in that way. A lot of fatalities happening because, from fentanyl. But it's not just the fentanyl. It's the drugs the fentanyl are mixed with. Nobody takes fentanyl deliberately. It's always mixed into something else. You crack down on the something else, and you have less deaths from fentanyl. So I think there's a logic there. The Trump administration is really determined to carry out this anti-drug operation, even though there's polls out that show the public generally disapproves of it. They want to see more evidence that these guys are who Trump says they are. Maybe some of them are queasy at the idea of killing them at sea, blowing up their boats when they're smuggling drugs. Media is doing a lot of sob stories that these are not drug lords or cartel operatives. They're just dupes, hardworking, poor guys that are just running a boat, and that's who we're blowing up. I think that's working. So there's been a public relations cost to this operation, but the Trump administration, Secretary of State Rubio, still 100% behind it. So there is something the White House knows here, maybe that it hasn't entirely shared with the public, that's motivating this operation.
We don't talk a lot about him, but Marco Rubio is quickly becoming one of the most significant political forces in Washington, isn't he?
Oh, yes, he's an amazing individual. He came out of a presidential campaign in 2016, didn't go well for him, seemed to have scuttled his aspirations to rise higher, at least for the time being. But instead, he went to work for the second Trump administration and became the superstar. He's got like 6 jobs now that he's holding down at the same time. He's become a very effective public speaker. He really knows how to handle the press, both domestic and international. So he's become a huge asset to the Trump administration, which is interesting when you remember how nasty Trump Trump was to him in 2016, called him little Marco, treating him like a kid playing in the adult playground or something. And now Rubio's become one of the best assets the Trump administration has. That is how you get better at politics. You don't let it get personal.
And a younger man like J.D. Vance, and that ultimately leads to people speculating. And Trump's been asked before, and he won't really come down on either one of them. He talks about how stellar they both are. Some people imagine them partnering. What could you see? Them battling one another for their own top of the ticket, or aligning forces?
I think it's more likely they would work together. I could really see a Vance-Rubio ticket being what comes up next time. I think the sitting vice president, has got to be on top. That's just understood. But I could certainly see Rubio taking the vice presidential slot there. They're both very young, as you pointed out. They've got a lot of time. If Rubio is the vice president on a winning ticket in 2028, he's perfectly positioned to take over as the president 2 terms after that. So it's not like he's giving anything up by running as vice president. And I think that would be a great combination. From everything I see, the two of them get along very well, and they seem to agree on most major issues, including drug interdiction. So I think they're much more likely to work together than to have a vicious primary battle.
Let's talk about the continent of Africa. President Trump has threatened to launch strikes in Nigeria. How real is that? The slaughter of Christians is very real. We know that. And here again, the domestic criticism: no more foreign wars. I hear it a lot, and I get it. I totally understand it. But where do you come down on us injecting ourselves in some form or fashion in the slaughter of Christians on the continent of Africa?
I could see targeted airstrikes and counterterror operations much more than a ground invasion. Nobody wants boots on the ground in Nigeria. It's the ultimate quagmire. The Nigerian government is, frankly, one of the more dishonest governments out there. They're constantly bragging that they have the insurgents under control. They've eliminated Boko Haram, and then it's all nonsense, and the terrorists are more dangerous than ever, and more of Nigeria is taken over by insurgents. The current excuse the Nigerian government is making when we say that there's a Christian genocide in progress is they say, oh no, everybody's getting killed out there. Everybody's getting kidnapped. Nigeria is a lawless wasteland and Muslims are dying too. Doesn't really fill anybody with confidence. And anybody who's worked as a Christian mercenary or worked in humanitarian relief in Nigeria, they know that's not true. The violence against Christians is a targeted ethnic displacement operation. They're trying to drive them out of the land they've occupied for a long time in their part of Nigeria and take it over. It is, I think, a genocide is not the wrong term for it. And it's about time the international community did something. But it's hard to do anything when the Nigerian government, which is the sovereign government of the country, says, oh no, it's not that big a deal. Everybody's dying over here and we're doing the best we can. That's hard to fight back against, short of just declaring their government invalid and invading their country.
You're as rock solid a conservative as I know, John Hayward, but as National Security Deputy Editor, you follow and monitor international affairs and our country's interaction with international entities. So when you hear domestically people who supposedly are on our side saying, this president is too bothered with all this outside stuff, he needs to be focused on the domestic agenda, you say what?
Well, last month was a confluence of events. You had the shutdown, and you had President Trump very focused on foreign policy. He was out of the country for a big chunk of the shutdown drama. He was working on his Asia trip, which was very important to him and very successful. He got a lot done. But foreign policy does not win elections, and there is a sense building even among some of Trump's supporters that he's become too disengaged from domestic politics. He's not doing enough to take care of the issues in the United States. I think he's refocusing on that. You saw the statement he did when he reactivated the government. Very tough comment about the Democrats being extremists and taking the country hostage. I think he's getting back into the fight, and you do have to pay attention to these domestic issues. Foreign policy is so hypnotic because you feel like you've done a lot, you're making historic progress, you have foreign governments telling you how great you are. That's all wonderful, but at the end of the day, that does not win elections, and the midterms are coming up. There has to be a focus on domestic issues.
And I think it's important to always keep in mind that standing in the room talking about all these international issues most of the time is the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. And these deals that they're doing economically with other countries is tied to foreign policy, but also bettering the economic situation at home. I think it's a multi-pronged approach. It's hard to explain, I think, often. But John Hayward, brilliant stuff. Always grateful for you, National Security Deputy Editor at Breitbart. Thank you, my friend. Have a great weekend.
The Chris Stigall Show Podcast.